to the Soulfire session. We are back today with Josh for our second episode in our financial series, and this one is Your Money Blueprint. How are you today, Josh?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, thanks so much for being back. I'm excited for today's episode. We are going to be focusing on helping our listeners understand what a financial plan is. I think you're going to help us understand a bucket system, which I'm excited to hear more about and simplify that. And for our listeners, we're really just going to help you understand how to set goals that match your real life. So, Josh, my first question for you is, what is a financial plan? We hear about it a lot. And so, when it comes to money, I feel like people can get a little weird sometimes and awkward, and it feels very personal. So maybe let's just lay the foundation for our listeners of like, what is a financial plan?
Christina, at the core of it, it's just a roadmap showing you here's where we are today, the things that we've already done up to this point, and then here's where we want to go. And our goal is to help figure out what are the steps that you need to take to get from here to there. And that's what a roadmap is. But it's actually really, if you get a little deeper into it, there's two pieces to the financial plan too. There's one piece is recognizing what are you doing a great job at that you need to be able to check the box off and say, hey, these are the right moves. Let's keep going here. And then the second piece is what do we need to improve or add, change, get more education around, wherever that might be to help develop more confidence in that plan. And so that's where we're going to go over today as well. And when I was mapping out a lot of the opportunities to support in this conversation, it's focusing on not just how to change life, but also recognize that you're probably doing a lot of great stuff already too. And we got to make sure we know what that is.
That's a great point. It's almost like a performance review, if you will, right? Like, how are we doing? What are we doing well at? Where do we need to improve? And can we get to where we need to go? You mentioned that a financial plan helps people achieve their goals. What are some of those goals that people have that they're trying to achieve when they come to you? Or like what kind of goals are we talking about? Are we always talking about retirement? Are we talking about other things? What does that look like?
Yeah, a lot of times it's going to start with the big ones. Yeah, I want to retire one day. I want to send my kids to college. I want to buy a house. And then it starts going to things a little more personal. I want to pay off my credit cards. I want to have a better relationship with my money day to day. I want to understand how to invest. And then you can start working through some of those different pieces. But I think the other key to all this, Christina, is, and you recognize this too, is that everyone's on their own path, like we talked about last time. So
Yeah.
everyone's plan is going to be very different. And it's unfair to think that you're supposed to sit on someone else's plan. And so part of this also is trying to gain clarity on what is part of your plan. And sometimes it doesn't even have to do with your finances. I mean, getting in shape, getting to church every Sunday, whatever that is important to you, that's going to also expand and compound across all of this stuff too. And so from a planning standpoint, that's going to be also a part that you'll get to explore when you're going through this.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, a lot of times, especially in the culture that we live in, everyone's putting their best foot forward on social media most of the time. And, I read one time that we always overestimate what other people make, how much money they have, what their life is like. We always overestimate that. And that can really lead to some feelings of insecurity and self doubt. For those people who feel like they're overwhelmed or they feel like they're behind, they're looking around them and feel like everyone else, is on this path and maybe they are looking at someone else's path. Like, I think what you said is a great point, which is my Pilates teacher always says, like, keep your eyes on your own mat. So like, just kind of let's lock back into our path.
Yeah.
What are the steps like for someone who does feel overwhelmed or behind? Like, what advice would you give to them, or what steps would you say they should take?
And maybe coming back to what your Pilates teacher says, keep an eye on your own map. I think the first thing is just figuring out where you are. That's a lot of times. A lot of people will focus so much on the going forward that they won't take a second to just gain clarity on where are we today. And so that's where I would start. If we had to break it down into maybe steps to begin your financial planning journey, step one is write down just what you've already accomplished. I think that's a big part of it, the good and the bad. I have a savings account. Here's how much is in my savings account. You can even take notes on the side of like, here's where it's been before, and here's where I'd love to get back to. Here's how much I have in my 401k. Here's what I'm putting into it. Here's how the company matches. Starting to just gain some clarity on what do you already have in place, and it may even be, here's my level of credit card debt. And don't just put, hey, I have $50,000 in credit card debt, but try to take some notes on like, how did it get there? This is from an emergency I had with my house last year. This was from a vacation that I couldn't miss with my friends. Start writing those things down, and don't judge yourself on it, because that's not what we're trying to do here. But it's just to spend some time to understand first, where are we in our financial plan. Once we get to that point, then we can start talking about what are we trying to accomplish. And so there's really two pieces to it. One is, what's my balance sheet look like? And when I say balance sheet, is what's all my assets? What are all my liabilities? Assets being, bank accounts, investments. It could be your house. It could be other, tangible assets like land, or some people it could be jewelry or gold or whatever it might be. But like right now, I listed everything that I have, and then taking those side notes on like, how'd you get to that point in each of those accounts. Also adding, what do we have available that's showing up down the road? So I have a salary, I have bonuses, I have rental income or whatever it might be that's going to start showing up as other additional resources down the road. And then we move to step two, which are going to be, what are the goals that I want to focus on? And if this is the first time that you've gone through this, then there's not too many goals to write down on the front end. Write everything down. I want to retire. I want to buy a house. I want to go on vacation every year. I want to be able to send my kids to college. I want to have my kids in traveling sports. I want to do all of it. Just write them all down. Big ones, small ones, every single one of them that are out there. And then start spending some time looking at the goals and saying, what am I doing today for these goals? Am I doing anything here? For retirement, am I actually putting money in my 401k? If I don't have a 401k, have I done anything for myself like an IRA or other types of vehicles that are out there? And if you don't even know what's even out there, maybe that's the point. I don't even know what to do, and put just a question mark next to it.
Yeah, I think you said something really good, and I want to make sure that our listeners really heard it, which is write down where you are without judgment. And so I think that is one of the things where, especially when it comes to money, people start getting judgy about themselves and their own values, because they may go spend X amount of money on this vacation and then also be saying they want to save for a new home or a new car or college or whatever. And in their mind, those both can't be true, but they can be, and that's okay, right? We can do both. And so just knowing where we are helps us understand, where we need to go. And the other thing that I want to make sure I highlight is, if the thought, for our listeners, if the thought of trying to label something as an asset or a liability on a balance sheet seems overwhelming, I would encourage you that you don't have to know which one it is. Just write down things that are significant that you have, that are, like you said, that are in your, accounts. Write that down. If you have a car, a boat, a whatever, motorhome, rental properties, whatever you have, just write it all down. One of the conversations I had was with a friend who owned a horse, and she was speaking with her financial planner, and he was like, that goes in the liability column. Right. And so like, it's okay. Like, you never know. You might think it's an asset. It might need to go on liability. It's flexible. Here we are. But just, to do that inventory is a huge first step. And then you go and you meet with someone, right? So like, at what point should someone talk to a financial planner? Should they, before they start, after they've done this inventory? Like, where do we bring in a partner?
Now, of course, I'm a little biased as a financial planner. I think everyone deserves to have a partner in this stuff. And no different than anything else out there. I mean, working out is easier when you have someone doing it with you. You think of all these major goals that you have. It's nice to have someone you can bounce ideas off of. They can keep you accountable. But sometimes it does require you to get some more personal connection before you go to the planner so that you don't feel like they're asking you questions that you don't even know what you're trying to accomplish. And that can be challenging itself. I definitely would encourage you, even if you have a meeting scheduled with a planner or whatever it might be, or if you're going to do it on your own, taking these steps first is going to first create that clarity that we need to then start building a financial plan. And remember, this is not the financial plan. This is just understanding where we are today. And we need to be able to get that down first before we can start talking about where we want to go from there.
I like that. And so great point. This is not the financial plan. This is just a inventory. This is where are we? So what is within the financial plan, right? Like a lot of times you hear there's bucket systems or people will say make sure you're diversified and like different things and so people get confused. So kind of can you enlighten us a little bit on what a good financial plan maybe contains or what is the bucket system or high level like what do we need to know?
Yeah. Well, and every goal is going to have its own different feel to it. And a lot of times it's also tied to the time horizon to the goal. Retirement might be farther out for you than your vacation this summer. And so that the way that you're going to be building for that goal should be traditionally different. But whenever I think of money, almost everything is tied around three different places that the money is going to come from. The first is going to come from your cash flow. And what I mean by that is, let's say your goal is to go on a date this Friday night with your spouse. You're probably going to use your paycheck from that month to pay for that date. So that one accomplishes that goal. Once again, as big or as small as you want it to be can be part of the financial plan. I know my wife and I talk all the time about getting to more of a consistent date night part. That's part of my financial plan, and I want to make sure that I incorporate that. Something like retirement, for example, farther down the road for me, I want my money to work for me a little bit harder than maybe my paycheck on its own. And so I may put more in bucket number two, which would be investments. And investments doesn't have to always be the stock market. It could be rental properties. It could be businesses. Everyone's going to have their own path, and we'll figure that stuff out later. But the third bucket is going to be our savings. And I think whenever you think of every goal that we have, it's going to come from one of those three buckets, if not a combination of those three buckets. If I'm sending my kids to college today, hopefully I'll have done some longer term savings over the last 18 years, and I have some investments, whether it's a 529 or a general investment account, something that might be there. And that's going to work really well to help me use for college. But also there might be times where the 529 doesn't help. Meaning, what if it's invested in the stock market and it's having a bad year? We don't want to use the investments. Or what if it's an expense that's not tied to what is considered a qualified education expense? So I'll be using bucket two, my investments when it makes sense. I may also want to have just general savings. Or if I'm working during those years, I may still use some of my salary. And the problem is we don't know. A lot of times when we're planning long term, we don't know exactly what life is going to look like. And so that diversifying across different ways we're building becomes a really important piece.
Which of those buckets is most often overlooked?
You would normally think it's investments, whether it's like a lack of
That's what I would guess.
education or, it's not knowing what's even available to you. So, do I invest here in this account? Do I buy these types of stocks? Whatever it might be. What I actually see is the most overlooked account is your savings account. That's the one that's often overlooked, and not for everyone, but a lot of people are great quote unquote savers, but what they really are really great deferred spenders. And that's a very big difference. And being able to recognize that, and it's not that that's a bad thing, but if I'm going to be going on vacation this fall and I save up to go on vacation this fall, that's a good thing. But that's not really true savings for me. That's just me deferring my spending for another bigger goal that I have down the road. And if we're talking about some of these really big goals, such as retirement or having an emergency fund, we need to build savings into a place that we're not going to touch unless a certain situation pops up that we need it. And so the amount of people that I talk to, and they'll have a great savings account. And I'll ask them, well, what's the purpose of it? Well, I'll just, if I need it for this or that, or I'll tap into it for Christmas or whatever it might be. That's a different purpose than this bucket that I'm talking about, because that's basically just cash flow. It's just cash flow that you did from a previous paycheck that you're using for the current goals that are there. So
Yep.
when I think about that, a lot of times I encourage people to have enough cash saved to not need any of your income for 3 to 6 months. That's what you'd call an emergency fund. And that number is because when I think of the big things that can happen during your working years, it's losing your job, it's falling ill, it's having a major house expense or something like that that pops up. And what I find is traditionally 3 to 6 months of your general cost of living is enough to weather one or two of those storms at a time.
Yep, absolutely. That's really interesting. I absolutely would have guessed that it was investments that would be overlooked. And so great point about savings versus deferred spending. So I think that a lot of people are probably really good deferred spenders and maybe not as good quote savers, right? So the 3 to 6 months of expenses, right? Or is that 3 to 6 months of all like
But
cost of living?
that's a great question, because what if your take home pays $100,000 a month? Do you need 300,000 in your savings account? I mean, maybe if that's what you feel comfortable with, but it's more tied to cost of living. So, if it's costing me on average X a month, I don't care what my take home pay is. Even if I'm in that point where I'm spending more than I'm making, which some people are, the number is what your cost of living is. That's what we need to be focusing on. And that brings up another really big point, is a lot of people I talk to will fold in a fourth bucket to their planning, and it's their credit. It's their credit cards. And I'm a big fan of credit cards, by the way. I think that the purpose for them originally came out to help with some protection against theft. It helps build your credit score. If you use it appropriately, you can get your miles and your points, which is free money, and it has all those really great values to it. I use credit cards every single day with all my spending that I do, but they're also one of those highly uneducated spaces when it comes to finances, and are one of the biggest issues that I see in today's world when I'm looking at people's balance sheets that tend to really cripple the ability to be successful in a financial plan. I actually was thinking about this the other day. It's not uncommon for me to talk to people who have 30, 40, 50, $60,000 in credit card debt. In today's world, that can be very easy to do with how much everything costs. But for someone that holds about $30,000 on average on credit cards, and if, let's say, just for example, it's 25% interest rate, which is kind of common for credit cards these days. If you're just paying interest off every month, that means you're going to pay $7,500 in interest that year, which is how much you could max a Roth IRA with. And if you weren't doing that and you instead were giving that money to yourself and to your future, maxing a Roth IRA every year between now and retirement, that could be the game changer or the differentiator of your ability to retire.
Right.
And so
That's great.
I think it's important to also incorporate that there is a fourth bucket, and don't try to avoid the conversation around it, but recognize that we can use it responsibly, and it can be helpful, but it also could be one of the bigger dangers in the financial plan.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's great. So I think, we kind of talked about taking an inventory and then what the buckets are. And so as we're walking down this path of we're going to take a partner, we're going to inventory where we are, we're going to be honest with ourselves. We're going to set some realistic goals, right? Things that we know are coming. We're also going to have, we know there's going to be an unknown bucket. Like here's a little bucket for like, the unexpected that we are expecting, right? So as we're walking through that, what cadence should people be looking at their money? Like you reference a monthly date night with your wife, and that's something that's important to keep your marriage thriving, right? And so when we talk about keeping our finances thriving, what does that touch point look like? Is that monthly, weekly, quarterly, annually? Like how often should we be doing that?
Of course, everyone's going to be different in their path. And if everyone had a bunch of free time and you could do it every week, that would be great. But I also
Mhm.
understand, even in my phase of life with little kids at home and a business and employees and all the responsibilities of life, that's not easy to just take a huge step back every single week. And so I definitely don't think once a year can be successful either because so much occurs over a 12-month period of time. I think a big starting point, if you could, is to try to break it into quarterly chunks. And every quarter doesn't have to be your super crazy deep dive of all the numbers and everything you have going on, but it could be a real short. These are the goals to set out for. Here's what I've done so far. Why am I not on track? And then trying to figure out what do we need to change over the next quarter to get myself in a better place. And I think if you can do that over time, that will slowly start compounding your plan into where you want it to go. And I think it's also important to recognize that there's going to be a lot of good, bad, and ugly. I mean, it's going to have some good stuff. Yeah, and celebrate that. I did great on my credit cards, spending this year. But I really didn't do a good job at investing in my 401k. And man, I'm just so bad at monthly spending. My DoorDash is crazy. Like that's ugly. Like recognize that's okay. We're gonna all have that, but to recognize it is almost just as important as putting the energy around solving it.
I like that. That's good. What would you say is, I only have a couple more questions. So, what would you say is one common mistake people make when they go to organize their finances?
Yeah, great question. I think it's the fact that well, maybe not as much an organization, but when they're trying to start a financial plan, is trying to find a plan that's going to work immediately. I think that's the biggest thing about this is it's a lifelong journey to plan. Once you have your plan in place and you feel like you figure it out, everything changes. You get a new job, or you lose your job, or maybe you decide you want to buy a new house, or maybe your kids are changing schools, or maybe your kids get big into a certain sport that wasn't part of the plan originally. I mean, things are going to be constantly evolving and growing, and that's where having these touch points with yourself along the way is really important. And I think the other thing also is some people are really great at this stuff. Like they love budgeting. I've seen these amazing, crazy spreadsheets from clients of like every penny they spent. And then I've seen a lot of my clients who I ask how much money they spend, they have no idea. And I'm okay with either. But if you can recognize who you are and solve those, if I'm really bad at something, I'm not just going to avoid it. I'm going to find a way to incorporate it into my life. If I'm a bad saver, I'm gonna auto draft saving. If I'm bad at credit cards, I'm gonna try not to use my credit cards. I think that's a big part of this also is recognizing within your planning if there's things that you're just not good at, don't try to avoid it. Just try to find a way around it.
What is one small change? If I was going to do one thing today, what is one small change that people can make that will make the biggest long term impact in their financial clarity or like their financial plan going forward? Like, what's one thing that all of our listeners, like, you would say, okay, if you could do one thing, do this?
I had someone ask me, why is a 401k always someone's biggest asset? And it's not always their biggest asset, but it's one of their biggest assets. And it's because it's on cruise control for most people. I think that's the key. If you have to go in there every single paycheck and transfer money to your savings account or pay off that credit card or whatever it might be, that's not easy to do. And if you can do it, great, good for you. Most people don't have the capacity to take something like that on every single time for the rest of your life. So putting things on cruise control is a really great way to be able to put this in place. Your mortgage is on cruise control. It should be at least. Your 401k is on cruise control. So why not put the other things on cruise control too? And that means, for a lot of my clients, if we're not doing true savings, then maybe have two savings accounts. Maybe have an emergency fund and a deferred spending savings account, and put some auto saving and say every month I'm going to save 5% of my paycheck into my deferred spending and 5% into my true savings. And that starts creating those compound over time success in the plan. And that's going to tie up any of these goals. So when you're mapping out these goals that you have and you're realizing of the goals that I'm mapping out in my financial plan that require savings to accomplish, not just money habits along the way, Then finding it, creating auto contributions or auto payments, wherever it might be to do that, and then using those quarterly checkpoints to be able to see how's the progress. That's what's going to really drive that success over a long period of time.
I love that. Yeah, I am definitely one of those people that love to have it automated for me, right? Like, I am not good, to your point about credit cards, like, I am not good about going in there every month and paying it off. Like, I'm just not good at that. I would tell you that I'm not good at that. However, I do see there are benefits, right? Of if I have a gas card and I only use it for gas, like, I would be paying that anyway. And so then there's points and rewards and all of that. And so setting it up in a way that it comes due or it alerts me, like, and it's as automated as possible, definitely is one of the things that helps keep our family on track, I would say. And actually, the truth is the way I have automated it is my husband's really good at that, so I have let because
And
I
maybe
have
that's it
automated
too.
it
Yeah.
by saying, can you handle this? So thank you so much for that. I've really enjoyed our conversation. One of the things I wanted to kind of highlight here is financial planning. Yes, it is about money, right? It is about our finances, taking care of stuff. And having a good financial plan, yes, in theory and hopefully in reality leads to having more money, but there's a whole other layer that goes along with this, which is a feeling of peace, of security, of being able to relax, like a calm. So, can you tell me a little bit about, like, when you worked with clients or even in your own life, what does it feel like to go from not having a good handle on finances or on long term planning, I guess I would say, to at least having a plan? Like, what are the other feelings that go along with that?
And I think it's a great way to think about it too. Something that I always connect back to when I'm thinking of what we do for our clients. Most of us have a primary care physician. We go to the doctor throughout time, and once a year, twice a year, whatever it might be, and they take your blood, you stand on a scale, and they tell you here's your problems. You have high cholesterol, you're overweight, you're high risk for cancer, whatever it might be. We all have those things, and sometimes they'll give you some medicine or something like that to help you solve it. But it can be very reactive. The financial plan is the same way. Imagine you being your own doctor. You're going in there, you're recognizing I have these problems. I'm not on track for this. I haven't saved for that. I'm overspending here. And you know these are your problems. And maybe you put some things into place to help get that into plan. Over time, you look up, you're not getting better. You're not really seeing progress. You're just constantly hearing the same pain that you run into every single year. And then there's those concierge, medical services that are out there. And of course, those can be kind of expensive and that, not for everyone because of the scope of work that they do. But there's those concierge medical services where you go in and they say, hey, you have high cholesterol, and hey, this is going to be what we're going to do to get that accomplished. We're going to have you meet with a personal trainer every week, and you're going to work out with them, and you're going to have this nutritionist who's going to give you your diet, and you're going to track that every single day on this app, and all that kind of stuff. Whether that's on your own or that's with a financial planner, I think that's what a financial plan is supposed to do for you. And even if you weren't with a concierge doctor and you're just with traditional primary care, and they said, hey, you need to meet with yourself every month and look at how you're doing with your diet, that's going to create way more success than the traditional, hey, you're overweight, good luck with life kind of conversation that we're sometimes, we're used to. And if you can do it on your own, then that's great. I know a lot of people who are great at working out and they can motivate themselves to go run a marathon and all that. And if that's you, then you can do your own financial plan. But if that's not you, you're just too busy in life or you just struggle to be able to create that consistency. That's a lot of times when you get that financial planner, because once you have that in place, everything is going to be better. You're going to feel a lot better. And it's not about trying to judge where you're at. It's about just helping you feel more confident about where you're trying to head.
I love that. Thank you so much for your time today. And listeners, hopefully you have more clarity around what a financial plan is, kind of what are the components and where to start when you want to create a financial plan. And most importantly, hopefully you heard to kind of give yourself some grace, that all of us are on our own path, and that my financial plan probably doesn't look like Josh's, and it probably won't look like yours. We have different priorities. We have different families. We have different goals and things that really set our soul on fire. And so would make sense that our finances would look a little bit different. So thank you so much, Josh. And listeners, you can find us at thesoulfire.com and then on all of our social media outlets as well. And have a great day.